Good afternoon, everyone, and welcome. It's the Valentine Day Sunday Sessions, 14th of February, 2021. Well, thank you so much for joining me on our weekly time of exploring nature-centered folklore, connecting to your favorite sanctuary space, and expressing inspired visions from your sanctuary through your poetry, writing, arts, craft, performance, and problem solving. Now, today's Sunday session on Valentine's Day, well, it's not typically Valentine-y, unfortunately. It's water dragons, serpents, and snakes. And today we're going to focus on various things water dragony and serpenty, water serpents, kundalini, and how dragons got into the Celtic folklore through a sort of back door. And there's a couple of pictures, if I can get the photos going. We're sticky again. There we go. This is out at Hazelwood, and there's that wooden dragon that was out in the loch there, Loch Gill. And each time we visited it, it get closer and closer in, and there it is when it came ashore. Now, dragon lines and dragons and serpents as water bearers, going to be covering that as well. And unfortunately, don't have any guests today. I did put it out there for any Reiki masters or anybody who uses or teaches or facilitates kundalini in their practice to please come live, because I wouldn't say I was the most experienced at that. I wasn't taught too well on it. Anyway, it's just me. I hope you don't mind. It's going to be just me today. After loads of guests, lovely guests last week, and we got some lovely guests next week. So it's just me today. But I trust you'll enjoy. There's plenty of pictures, a lot of fun things to go through. And I was hoping for a panel session, but later on, let's have a bit of a Q&A about this subject. It's probably a little bit weird, so do join if you wish. And if you wish to volunteer, do leave a message and I can send you a live link, a live URL, so you can join me here. And anyway, I think I better see who's with us today, who's braved their early bit of Valentine's to come and say hello. Who have we got here? There's a few people watching, I see, but nobody's actually left a comment yet. So I'll come back to you very soon. But thank you for people who are watching, and I'll come back to you soon. So these Karakoi sessions and Labyrinth Gardens, when people can come here after the COVID, they're brought to you largely due to Patreon subscribers. And some of you are already Patreon subscribers that are watching today. So I'm very, very, always very grateful, because it makes it possible I can pay the subscriptions and cover the costs, which I might not be able to do otherwise. Without your support, I probably couldn't be here this afternoon hosting this. So without further ado, let's see, what is a dragon? I think that's a sort of a first question to come up with. And as I say, we have, the water bearers. That's a lovely picture within a cave. I think that's a beautiful one, because it looks very dragon-like, doesn't it? But anyway, this is probably what you're more familiar with. What is a dragon? And in the West, most of us think of fire-breathing, four-legged, and with wings, something a bit like that, if you remember the Merlin series that the BBC did. And in the East, the dragons there in the East, they don't have any fire. There's no wings. They're four-legged, but they're highly intelligent, wise, and though they look pretty fierce, they're very supportive, very friendly, and they're protectors for the East, the Orient. And of course, dragons, they're celebrated there because to them, they have the power over the water, the power over the rain. So we've had plenty of dragon action here, haven't we? Today, anyway. Anyway, to look at the dragon word origins. And I've read somewhere that one of the origin words was drakon. It means scaly. And for good reason, there's a scaly side of a dragon there. but I'm not sure what language that actually comes from. But I've heard the word dragon actually comes from an Anglo-Saxon word, draka, which is a winged creature that evolves from what we call a worm. And that worm, I haven't put it up, but it's WYRM, if you want to put our letters to it. It's a worm, a serpent from the earth, and there's a sort of real artistic impression of one. Quite something, isn't it? And this worm, being a serpent from the earth, if you're on Spotify or Apple, look up Jack the Lad. They're from Northumbria many years ago. And they put a medieval story into song on an album called The Old Straight Track, which actually the album has songs of a lot of things I'm going to be talking about today. But one of the songs is called The Worm, and it's about a jealous witch who turns a beautiful woman into a serpent. The serpent becomes a dragon in Northumbria, and there's a lonely Frenchman who wants to slay this dragon, come over the water, slay the dragon, and become a near hero, because he was a very shy man. He wanted to do something to impress the women. So he goes to Northumbria in a sailboat and it has a rowan mast. And of course, rowan is there to protect men. It calls the goddess to them to protect them and protect spells from the witch. So he faces the dragon with a sword, but this dragon is crying. And so the dragon explains to him that instead of slaying her, he should kiss her 3 times and he will have a nice surprise. So on the first kiss, she cried. The second kiss, she smiled. And then on the third kiss, she turned into the beautiful Lady Margaret, which I did have a picture of, but she's not there, unfortunately. Anyway, this concludes, like these tales do, with a marriage, living in a castle, happily ever after, as they all do, and all that stuff. But this tale seems Saxon, came to Northumbria. Maybe it came with the Danes. I don't know where this story, but it seems to be believed that the Saxons brought to Britain the word draka, and that evolved from the Greek verb derkamaya. And sorry, I haven't got this up, but that means to see clearly. Derkamaya. Now, there's an aorist form of that word in Greek that turns it into a past event form, and that word is drakon, D-R-A-K-O-N, and that roughly changes the meaning from to see clearly from to enchantment or even acquired wisdom or vision. So this brings me back to the folklore of visions from the wells, the holy wells that I tell on the Sunday sessions sometimes, as being a place of vision, but also as being crossing points of the dragon lines, of the water dragon lines, being the crossing points. And that is said to be what makes some of these wells sacred, and why an ordinary spring well is declared as a sacred well. Now, stories of these crossing points are being where the water dragons take their rest. So where there's a crossing point, there's a spring and there's a well. It said the water dragons take their rest and they enchant prophetic visions to anybody who dares to peek down into the water of the wells. And I think I've got a little imagery as well. This is a lovely, just to give the sense of feeling, give the sense of atmosphere. It's not a well, but it's a pool of water. And imagine if you look into that, there you go. You got the dragon enchanting you looking up. That's my take on that one anyway. Now, during other Sunday sessions, I've also spoken of well visions being from the She and the Fae. They respond to the callers for visions from the wells when people are seeking and they're praying, they're meditating. And the stories from the imagery of the She, the Fae, and water serpents and the water dragons are all very similar in the stories. Now, during past Sunday sessions, I've also spoken of the North and South nodes in our astrology charts. And there's the symbols of them there. And those each being the individual dragon line and that we each live. Now, the South, if I got something here. Now, the South node, we are They said we are born from, so let's use that imagery, born from water, from a vision pool. And the North Node is the life's guide from that vision. And there we go. You go from a still water there that we're born from, that we look for our visions and connection to. And then when things are flowing, there's the life's guide of our vision, because we're talking about water things today, aren't we? Now, some stories tell us of us always having been umbilically connected to the earth goddess. And I love this picture of the earth goddess. She seems pretty connected to the earth there. And other folk stories tell us have always been connected to the earth serpent or a dragon. So take your choose, you connected umbilically to the goddess, or if you were at the East and the Orient, especially a couple of days ago, which was the Chinese New Year, is the sort of veil between the connection to the earth serpent and dragon. And there's other folklore stories tell of the fiery earth dragon being converted to a water dragon, or just pure water by the goddess. And this happens during the transformation time from Sawan to Imbolc. And I hope you can make sense of that. That's the sort of artist's portrayal of that transformation going on. And that transformed water being the water that fertilizes the land with new life in spring, an Imbolc experience that we should be going through where we are. Snow's melting. We've got quite a bit of water here and wind. And it's actually starting to turn sunny and nice now. But there's no evidence of belief in dragons from the Stone Age, Bronze Age, or Iron Age. But there is art from the Iron Age, and also through medieval scribing, that does seem to include dragon type of symbols. Here's a couple of stone ones. I don't know where they're from. They're museum pieces, but where they were taken from, unfortunately, I can't tell you. But there's another one there. So there is some sort of reference, it seems. But after the flight of the Earls, early 17th century, France, Belgium, wasn't it? I think they all went into the sort of Gaelic chieftains after being driven out, or they escaped before they were kind of confiscated by the English rebellion going on at the time. But one of these earls, an exiled Gael, Sovereign MacDonald, he commissioned the Ode Doherty to compile the Dunanfin book, a collection of Fenian lays, and he compiled it in Belgium in the early 17th century. And I haven't got any pages of this, unfortunately, but these included a story called The Pursuit of the Sleeve Drum. And this is a story of the dragon slaying antics of Fionn MacColl. It said the 17th century, they're writing up stories of Fionn MacColl going off with the Fianna and slaying dragons. And this story reads like a catalogue of islands, lochs, bogs, and rivers as it goes along and accounts for the slaying of dragons. And these are dragons and serpents in these stories. They're not the fiery ones. They're actually water serpents in Loch Nee, Cuillin, Erne, Irk, Lane, Reith, Shollen, Foyle, Emer, Milge, Sarah, Mask, Ligier, and River Lurg, and Loch Lurgan. And rivers as well, quite famous. There's a lot of stories of serpents within the Shannon and the Bann, for instance. Anyway, I'll take a break for a moment and see what you're saying. I see you making some comments here. Lovely to see you here. And we've got Sharon May Nicol. Good morning, all glad to be here with you. Snuggled in bed with soup, hot water bottle. It has been that sort of day. You didn't say where you were from, but if you are actually where we are here, surprisingly, we've had this massive change. We had snow this morning, then we had some heavy rain, and now it's mild and very spring-like, and the sun's coming out. And tonight, this evening, Valentine's evening, we should get a clear, starry sky and very mild, no frost tonight. And we certainly got the transition from winter to spring going on. So maybe you'll be out of bed soon because of the weather getting better. And there's a regular Donna Johnson sitting by the fireplace, looking forward to the story of fire spirits. Well, I'm sorry, I'm going to water them down because we're on the water dragons today. So I trust it'll still be interesting for you. And there's Donna again, snowy New Mexico. We got the polar vortex today, which never happens in February. Well, there you go. And Shell, hello from Wisconsin, minus 23C. Goodness, very, very cold there. But thank you for, if you're laying in bed and what you're doing. And I trust I'm not going to water down your day too much. Maybe it should have been fire dragons, but that was the Sawan subject. And of course, I split it up into two because there's so much to say on dragons and serpents. Well, I find there's plenty to say. Anyway, so really, what is a serpent? You know, I've talked of dragons a bit. There's a bit of a serpenty thing there. And serpent. Well, and I suppose, how is this different to a dragon? From the Latin serpens, that's where the word seems to have come, a crawling animal. Snake, they say, equals fertility, but serpent is sinful. And according to the Webster's New World Dictionary, a snake is a treacherous or deceitful person. I think that's been in conversation over the last couple of days. And a serpent, as I say, that's the snake, treacherous and deceitful. But the serpent is sly, sneaky, and also a treacherous person. That's what the dictionary says. And some of the reasons for saying that is the characters, they have forked tongues. There we go. Well, this is a snake with a forked tongue, just to remind you if you're not familiar. And there was a serpent, quite famous in the East, that shielded Buddha from the elements, so that he being protected through meditation, so that his meditation wouldn't be disturbed. And I said that Buddha's weight was supported by a coiled triple-headed serpent. Well, I don't have that, but I think this is a lovely another image of, again, thinking of the Buddha, but it's a Kundalini experience. And I'm going to be talking as best I can about the Kundalini experience very soon. Now, serpents in folklore, anywhere around the world, they're usually told of as being guardians of sacred spaces. And folklore tends to tell these stories of people trying to steal from the dragons because there's something they want to grab, smash and grab stuff. We know all about that. That the dragon is trying to hold up because it's in the gooder folklore, better folklore from the East, the dragon is there to protect the resources and the life for all people. But in the Western story, it's treasure for the taking, of course, very different attitude. But many storytellers, unfortunately, they make the dragons aggressive. And I think that's to get audience attention. And it gets audience attention, it seems, if the story spreads fear and uses it as a control, people get gripped by that. Again, that's topical, isn't it? So other storytellers, unfortunately, there's some other storytellers that do make the dragons and serpents come across as caring and loving, and that they encourage compassion and trust amongst the listeners. So you got the two types of storytellers, even with the dragons and serpents. Now, the stories around the world of female white serpents, and I think I've got an old illustration here, female white serpent or snake. And there you go. There's the white serpent transforming into a goddess. And that's a spring thing, a spring belief in China and some of the Orient. And also, again, sticking with the Orient, is the belief that the dragon and the serpent, the dragon especially, it's more serpent here, is a bringer of rain for the crops, for the sprouting seeds. And it's all about trying to do good. And all along in some of these stories, the serpents are doing this, and they're hoping that they eventually get a reward. It's said the serpents dream that as they attract all the water and the rain and they get life going, their actual dream is that before the summer's done, before the harvest is done, this is going to be the year when they'll get transformed into being a goddess. So that, and there's another comment here. That's and there's Elizabeth Flynn. Hi from County Wexford, wet and windy. Hopefully that will go away from you, and glad you're enjoying that. Hi, Elizabeth there. And Sharon, oh yeah, it's not winning bed. We said hello. Oh, great. Thank you again for being with us. And on we go. Now I'm going to spend a few more. Yeah, I said that I'll talk about the Kundalini, so let's get onto that pretty well. I'm sorry I'm an amateur with this. If there are any guests that could give us much more information, but this is how I approach the philosophy of Kundalini anyway. So because it appears to be very related to these water dragons and serpents. So Kundalini, a goddess described as a sleeping serpent, coiled 3.5 times around the base of the spine. And the first chakra, her name from the word, that's the first, coiled up as the first chakra, isn't it? And her name, it seems, has come from Kundala, meaning coiled in Hindu. But that word's also linked to Persian, maybe Babylonian, I would highly suspect that, or from the northern shamans, which I would think is older coming through Babylonia to Persian culture, as it was, and into the Hindu. But I suppose, let's put this up. I understand Kundalini as a journey from being that coiled snake and kind of uncoiling into spiritual maturation. Sort of a symbol for this, if that can be understood. And the symbol of this journey being 2 snakes coiled around a staff and crossing over each other at 7 points. There's a sort of a graphic illustration of that. And within ourselves, we have these 7 chakra points. And this goddess serpent, when awakened, climbs upward, chakra by chakra, until she reaches our crown chakra at the top of our head. And as she pierces each chakra, she brings an awakening to us. Now, perhaps this is like the wisdom of the origin of the word draken that was applied to. When the goddess journey is complete, a subject is said to be fully enlightened with Kundalini. And Kundalini, as I understand it, is really the unwinding of the life force. And this is what the dragon and serpent folklore is all about as well. Now, some texts describe Kundalini as 2 serpents coiled around the spine, much like the image of the double helix of our DNA. And, of course, that's got incorporated into, well, it hasn't been incorporated because the Caudaceous symbol was around long before the DNA. Maybe that symbol was trying to tell us something before the DNA was actually discovered. There's quite a few things from Babylonian times that we discover in a scientific way with a different explanation later on. So we have, can I come back to some example here? Maybe try that one. Serpent to the left, the Ida Nadi, serpent to the right, the Pingala Nadi. Now, symbolically, a serpent's been considered to be a power beneath the earth, as I've really been explaining. And that's the power that makes the plants grow, the trees go. So I can imagine the Kundalini rising is a lovely description. We think of it of ourselves in meditation, but I tend to think of it more as rising the new spring, the new plant growth. You know, when the seeds and the bulbs come up and you've got the new seeds, maybe new trees, and the buds starting to open. This is all a sort of Kundalini rising up until the harvest. So that's definitely breaking through it. So that's me on Kundalini. Now, before our life quest, I would like to talk a little about the mythology of dragon lines. And this is a sort of image of the world. Dragon lines, very mysterious. Some of you there, and do say about it, talk about it if you are. Some people amongst our guests, probably ley line hunters. There was a time when I was a bit of an addicted ley line hunter, definitely through my teens and 20s. and starting off with Alfred Watkins' Old Straight Track, and then on to John Michell and various other writers. But ley line hunters believe that the Iron Age Druids, I put the Druids in phonetics to call them Druids, but the Iron Age Druids, let's call them that, onwards believed in the dragon symbol as the whole of creation. Now, one interpretation is of a dragon being part serpent. Oh, let's get this. I'm trying to imagine this through. Interpretation is that the dragon is actually part serpent and part bird. So the serpent part represents the underground, merging with the above ground with the wings. I hope that makes sense. Anyway, here's a serpent on the ground. And a sort of yin and yang, I suppose. You get the ground serpent above the earth, if you've got the dragon with the wings. Down below, you always hear of the yin, the cool, the cold, the water. Above the ground, it's the sun, the light, and the warmth. And here's a lovely yin-yang that kind of explains what I'm fumbling around. There you go, yin and yang. We've got a water and a fire dragon together. And here's another artist impression of that as well. Although I think, with the colors, that gives that away. But I think that's a prettier one. Now, the sub-old tales of the serpent underground, as I say, a serpent being underground and actually just born out of water, comes above ground, sprouts wings when it comes to the surface. Now, John Michell, in his view over Atlantis, pointed out that every continent has some sort of belief in dragons, and these dragons being a symbol of fertility. The common path of this is life being a fusion of all elements. And the way that John Michell explained it was you get every living cell is born from the earth, is fertilized by the water below in the earth, deep down, and the wind above as well. So there you go. You've got the yin and yang explanation there for John Michell of the yin and yang turning seeds into dragons. And I think I've got another nice symbol for that. Here's the third one up. So seeds become dragons. But yin and yang and feng shui, they all sound very oriental, and they are, aren't they? But we do tend to, I think we do tend to lean a lot on the oriental for our mysticism and for an explanations of our spirituality quite a lot. Now, John Michell also pointed out that the so-called Druids practice a craft that we call geomancy, which is also known lay of the land. And this is, so if you're a lay hunter, you'll probably be quite familiar with drawings like this. And this lay of the land, or geomancy, is a careful surveying of the land for home construction, constructing our homes, community gatherings, and places for seasonal celebrations. Now, today, a modern diviner's term for this is commonly seeking out the thin places. And here's a thin places explanation. So whether it's geomancy, lay of the land, or thin places, I'll leave it up to you. Now, ley line hunters believe in straight lines connecting what we loosely call sacred sites. I've just taken this Scottish one as an illustration. And individually, we know these sites as the pointers being churches, stone circles, cairns, holy wells, and many standing stones as well. Also, Iron Age and medieval fortresses are considered as thin places too. And as Robin Williamson once said, you might be familiar with something like this, but I love the way Robin Williamson's described this. I've mentioned this on Sunday sessions before. But he says that where there were sacred places, where the water serpent would appear, these became druid sites, they became church sites, they became monastic sites, they became fortress sites and castles that then became Victorian country mansion sites. And today, they're building sites. So, ley line hunters, they would say that all these sites where the ley lines cross over power centers. There's another. There's the Michael's line, which every every lay hunter, that's kind of their big mascot. That's the one that leads it all. And power centers indeed. And my own personal belief is, as I say, I was a ley line addict. I'd follow these lines almost like walking straight and going these straight lines. But my personal belief these days is that the setting of ley lines could actually be the human ego developing the sites, putting the sites where they are to display the vanity of human construction. Because when I approach stone sites now and think of the human creation, it tends to be more of a display of, look what we can do, look what we can build, look at the power and strength we've got over you, rather than actually be a sacred site. They might have cleared off a grove of oak trees or something to put these stones up, but that's my view, that there's very much a lot of vanity in this. But that's a personal opinion. Well, if that's so, and these sites eliminate line life energy to a grid, is that due to our manipulation of it? I don't think human science has verified any of that, though. So this is all in the mystic realm. It's what we discover, what we feel, as I say, thin places. What do we feel when we go there? What's our interpretation? What's the story? What's the prophecy we get? And that's what we go along with. So even though that's my opinion, everyone's going to have a whole circle of stories or something like that. And you can share some in the comments now. Even if you say, "Oh, you're talking a load of crap, John." I don't mind that stuff at all. Anyway, another link that I've heard from a couple of native people. I went to the Hiawatha Festival in Upper Michigan a couple of times. A lovely event. I won't go into how it started, but it's to do with some old Finnish people using the old language, and found they could speak to the native people who spoke the similar language. So they got together and got the Hiawatha Festival. Now, when I was there and talking to some locals and native people, they said that these lines were caused by herds like buffalo, elk, deer, that tend to migrate in straight lines. And so humans set up stations along these paths. So that's the way they explained it. Now, funnily enough, there's some buffalo, and they don't look like as if they're going along in a straight line, do they? But I get the concept of what they were talking about. And archaeologists and anthropologists here in Ireland are now following ideas, considering that, and considering the time of cairn building, the ancient cairns, and I'm near Carrickeel here, 5,500 years old, that they were built during a time, an age of some global warming, and the grazing cattle, because the people of that time, the New Stone Age, I gather they had quite a reliance on cattle. They were settled farmers. But the grazing got bad, so the cattle started wandering off. They couldn't feed themselves, so they wandered off to graze, and also in straight lines. So for a while, these settled farmers became semi-nomad, following their cattle, as they could no longer contain them and feed them in their fields. I say this is a new study, seems to be a new study of the last few years by various archaeologists and anthropologists. And this is while others stayed behind. It said the women stayed behind and created stone cairns and maintained them. And here's a couple of Carrickeel ones there. There's a couple of, that one is G&H. There's 14, I think, there altogether. And they said they were built to be bone banks of their ancestors, because these tribes, they honored the bones of their ancestors that after the flesh had been burnt or fed, the bones existed were where their ancestors lived and where they stayed. And they always loved to honor these bones, sometimes broken up, put in pots, to honor them as season ceremony times, especially so on. But if they become nomadic because they had to follow the cattle, they couldn't transport all these pots of bones. So there's one theory, were these built as bone banks. There was apparently another tribe around still at the time. They followed the water, they followed the shores, and their whole culture was very different. They believed their entire spirit was in the water and not in the bones. So there we go. It's almost as if the two ancient races that were around what is now Ireland, and this is the water people, arrived, they say 12,000 roughly, 12,000 BC, 8,000 for these bone people arriving, the farmers, very different cultures. But anyway, so that's almost as the humans were like the water serpents and the fire serpents, because this was very much a fire crowd as well. Anyway, move on. So grazing mammal migration. To me, that's the only thing I really recognized in nature. I think about this often. It's the only thing I think I can recognize in nature that actually goes in a straight line. So this leads me to another belief that's not so well adopted by the ley line hunters, is that if there are dragon lines, let's look at the birds. You take birds, and the way they migrate when they take flight, they fly in arcs. They take routes, they're in arcs. And sometimes it's like in and out. It's like a helix path. And here, I forget, this is some kind of swan that's in Texas. And that red line is, I forget the species, but I got this graph. That red line you see is their migration to the north and turn around, how they come back. It's not exactly an arc, but not exactly straight lines as well. But that's the only thing I could find to give an idea of what I'm talking about there. Now, some ley line hunters call the straight ley lines dragon lines too. Now, ley lines are thought of as being like acupuncturists like this one, that when they take their craft onto the land, they think of the ley lines as thought of as being the meridians of the earth, that is the health and the life flow of the earth, just like acupuncturists identify the meridians being the map of life flowing through a network through our bodies. And ley hunters, when I was deeply into it, believe that the earth has some kind of meridian too. Now, this is not a faith I follow anymore, due to considering I can't see anything else in nature that flows in a straight line except these migrating mammals. But to me, it does seem like the human mission is often to control and convert life into neat and tidy straight lines. So being the old farter I am, I've kind of reduced it to that. Are we believing in ley lines because of our logical culture of we love stuff to be in neat and tidy straight lines? Ancient people built their homes in circles. Their language also went in circles and spirals. But as soon as we go into scribing, everything is linear. Once everything was linear in scribing, all of the homes, all of the places of congregation, even the churches, suddenly became rectangular. They became box shaped, and they became lines. And there's a story when I was worked as a mason on Iona, and one thing you noticed with old medieval buildings, that none of the corners are 90 degrees. And I was told, that was to demonstrate that humans are not perfect, that we can't have the 90 degrees, otherwise we got notions that we're perfect. But then I also heard from old medieval Mason culture, which were conflicting to the monastic culture, is that they refused to do the 90 degrees, because if you go into astrology, 90 degrees is a kind of challenge, isn't it? So they wanted to avoid the challenges that the 90 degrees done. Anyway, I believe more in what happened during my bird migration and DNA helic waves to me. It's a bit like how I imagine Kundalini rising, really, as well. So this would mean there are crossing points still. We still got these crossing points where the waves meet, just like the ley line hunters look at the crosses, straight crosses. And those crossing points being regarded still as thin places. And amongst the most famous of these places regarded for this We're looking at England a lot still, but look at Stonehenge, Avebury Circle, Salisbury Cathedral, Glastonbury, all that area regarded as thin places. And some stories tell these crossing points as being places where the water serpents or water dragons stop and rest, as I mentioned earlier. Now, there are King Arthur stories, which of course is from around that region, and it's told that he dreamt of dragons, especially at Mordred's conception, and just before Mordred killed him. And in that final dream, the legend tells of Arthur actually being eaten by dragons just before he's killed. So to me, what this brings to mind, and we're actually coming to Ireland at last, is the interpretation of the Sheila na gig imagery. I'm not going to show some Sheila na gigs, but a friend of mine, a friend of ours at a funeral a few years ago said, "Isn't it strange how we enter this life coming out of a hole and we leave it by going into a hole?" Now, on the peaks of Ballygawley Hills near Sligo town near here, there are remains of ancient cairns where ancient Breffni chieftains of the area where they were buried. And it's said that these places were chosen because the water from these cairns, the water from their bodies, would release from their bodies and flow down back into the lochs that were nearby these cairns. And there's two lochs there, so I'm not sure which one they're referring to. Here's Loch Lomond, which is below the Ballygawley Hills. But some say it's Loch Daggy, which is that one, that pool there, and that's Loch Gill in the background there. And these lochs acting as Sheila na gigs in the landscapes, they release the body water flowing into the loch, and this returns to where the water serpent may be to collect. So again, you got folklore crossing the water serpent with the earth goddess. I haven't, there's a few comments there. Let's see what you're saying at the moment. I hope that wasn't too messy. Hello, Marjorie. Cosmic Mirror through the YouTube. Hello, hello, hello. And yes, there we go. Greetings from Rock Hill, South Carolina. And Mary Dwyer, not too far away from here. Lovely to see you here. And Sandra Elizabeth Medium, good day to you too. And like the ground serpent pic, that was. I'm glad you thought that was a magical one. Great, lovely. Thank you for being with us. And for those of you who have missed the first part, this is going to be automatically archived, so you can catch up on the introductions. Anyway, as I mentioned earlier, I'll just get a quick drink here. The serpents, or dragons especially, didn't seem to appear into Irish and UK mythology until the monastic scriptoriums got into business. And back to my pictures again, find my pictures. And with the increasing Christian affiliations, dragons appeared in their scriptorium writings. And they appeared as serpents and dragons. In these scripts, the water symbolism with the scribes became eventually replaced by fire symbolism. And then it didn't take long for these, during the medieval times, when these scribes associated them with the devil. And we know where that went. Now, I often mention the battle between a woman chieftain, Gronya, and the Fomorian Draken, after he tried to woo and lure her into mating. And I've explained how that story evolved from being Gronya and Draken into the more patriarchal George and the Dragon. So Gronya changing the gender to George. And when that happened, when Gronya became George, then the third character came in, the humble maid of servitude. She was in there. And there's various stories that have reduced Gronya and the various Gronyas in storytelling who have been told of being leaders. They've been reduced to servants as well. I think Dermot and Gronya's story, which is an epic Irish epic that a lot of people know. And that's perhaps the most famous example where Gronya was kind of reduced in status in some way. Now, through the scriptoriums, it's assumed that George became the patriarchal priesthood. The dragon became Satan, and the old beliefs of the saved woman. I've got a George and the Dragon illustration here. Is this it? Yes, this is it. So in there, George, the patriarchal priesthood, dragon, the Satan, and the saved woman, who is the savior, symbolism of the savior and servitude of Christianity. However, the dragon has become the hero of some storytellers, but a scaremongering symbol with other storytellers. But the scaremongers are the fire dragons. And it's quite well known that Wales still carries the red dragon flag, and they carry it with pride. There's the Welsh red dragon. Let's see if I can pronounce this right. The Indo-Chinese Kitchwan. Let's try that again. Indo-Chinese Kitchwan. And that's the red dragon leads the way. That's how that translates. Right. There's a couple of you again. Linda Rosewood. Hello, Linda. One of our sponsors, Wendy Donegal. Great stuff today. Glad you enjoy it. Glad you joined in. I hope the sun that we've got here, sun and warmth and nice spring weather, is going to hit you in Donegal soon. Maybe not today, but glad you're joining in, and love to you there, and have a wonderful day. What else we got here? Wendy Willow from Ontario, sending love and light in these difficult times. Well, I hope it's not too difficult. There are some joyful things we can get on with despite being locked up and so forth. So here's to your lovely time. Oh, and Linda, love to Artemis there. And if she's watching, lots of love to you both. All right, move on. And there we go, more pictures. So a bit more about water dragons, I think, being water bearers and bringers of fertility. Now, in these, in the Orient, the dragon, snakes, and serpents, as I've been repeating, are symbols of water. But have they always been so? Anyway, considering dragon, snakes, and serpents called upon for water, it's said to be the bringers of rain, which after it looks like Donegal is still getting their fair share in the wind there, and I have a decent rain picture to go with that. There's a dragon in the sky bringing rain. I think that's a lovely picture. I love that one. And there's the Irish stories of the dragons actually creating rivers and putting heat upon them to create clouds and rain. So a combination, even the water ones can put a bit of heat on. Now there are the river girls also. I talked about the serpents in the lochs, the stories of the serpents in the lochs and also the rivers. But there's also the river girls that become goddesses. Shannon is perhaps the most famous, and Boan's another one for the Boyne. And when we pass on from this life, the serpent symbol seems to interpret it that we still carry on as something else. We don't just get born and die and that's the end of it. So in a way, there's this whole link to the water, that when the water leaves our body it becomes part of the underworld, like I was showing there, Ballygawley mountains, where the chieftains wanted to be high up so the water from their bodies rolled down into the lochs. That sort of ties into that. So if the water from my body was released, got its freedom, and got into the soil, it may find and join an underground stream. It may join an underground river, maybe evaporate into the clouds, maybe fall as rain showers. You know, your ancestors might be falling today. And this water serpent within us, it's within us at the moment in our body temple, but then it becomes free. And the stories of the Tuatha De Danann being sent to live underground also causes me to think of the serpent race. Were they a serpent race as snakes, underground snakes? And there's also, to link all this, I'm trying to get around to this, the idea of the lake serpents, and such as the Loch Ness Monster. Let's bring up a few Loch Ness Monster pictures. There we go. If you've been there, you're familiar with that site. And there's a jolly Loch Ness Monster there. And there's a third one splashing around there. Look at that real life photograph of a Loch Ness Monster splashing around. And the multi-headed nagas, they become human or serpent. It said they resided in underwater lakes as well, and that their offspring created rivers from waterfalls and springs, and off that goes into a river from there, and from the rivers evaporated into clouds and fell as rain. Now in Greece, there's the echidna, the half woman, half serpent, similar folklore, and it may be similar in Ireland. And there's also the giving out calling in Ireland of the rain clouds during the summer, but we want those rain clouds. Hence why this country, I think, is a land of saints, scholars, and storytelling, because of the wisdom that comes to us from the rain, from the serpents, from the rivers. It all interlinks. That's why we are the storytellers and scholars. It's the rain. Anyway, the water serpent realm for me is a bit like a secret guardian of folklore. It's the guardianship of folklore. And so let's see what you're saying about that. Beautiful images. I hope it's all making sense there, Donna. And Sharon May, thank you. Fascinating info. I hadn't thought of the dragons as water beings. Yeah, very much so. I sort of like that better. And of course, that's been around, I think, a lot longer. Very much the Oriental, very much, as I've been saying, Indo-Asian Indo-Asian countries like Thailand and Vietnam, Laos, Cambodia, very much, and Nepal, of course, a bit further over, very much into that folklore and celebrating it. But of course, in the West here, the folklore is more about the earth goddess than the water serpent. I think a lot clash, because the water serpents are generally regarded as feminine as well. The fire dragons we always think of as males, and they're really talked of and told in stories of males. But the water ones are always females. And if you go back to the yin and yang that I showed earlier, the water underground, the yin, the female, the feminine, and then the yang are the fiery, the male. So it's just all part of this symbolism package, whichever you feel comfortable with. And it's a shame that that's all regarded as superstition, fear, devil, so forth. And if there's one message today, is take that away from you. And don't be afraid of dragons. Don't be afraid of serpents. They're all part of the spreading of life. It's something to be grateful for, the movement of water. But in a way, the she and the fae stories are a little bit more gentler, maybe, than the serpent ones. So I'm just taking all this from another angle today. Anyway, I don't have any guests, unfortunately. Nobody came up to talk about Kundalini or anything else. And one thing I must bring up with, I think I've got some pictures on it. You know, there is actually a reptile that's called a water dragon. And there he is, or her. There's a water dragon. And it's very common. It's a native reptile of Thailand. It's also found in Laos, Cambodia, Vietnam, and in southwest China as well. And many people, they keep these as pets. And there's one in action coming out of the water there, just to prove they are water dragons. And they are they're very docile and friendly as pets, so I'm told. And they actually relate and interact with their pet owners. They're not just like a snake or something put into a cage and they ignore you. There is an interrelationship. But even so, It's not for me. I wouldn't have one because it is a wild animal. It is for the wild. And despite its obvious favorable responses to human kindness, I think if it'd be fine if you're living in Thailand and somewhere and you've got a water dragon that comes up to you and says hello or whatever they do. Leave it to the wild. That's my feeling on it. Anyway, let's see if you've got some more about that. So a little bit on water dragon energy. Yeah, all for it, eh? Great stuff. So nobody's volunteered for panel time. I've nearly done an hour anyway, haven't I? All by myself. Goodness me. We will have guests next week, and I'll be talking about that shortly. And I trust you've enjoyed this afternoon, even though it's just me, but I've not finished yet. Keep on asking questions about anything we've talked about this afternoon. Is there any pictures here that I've not told you about? I don't think so. I think I've sort of covered it all here. So no panel today. And as I say, these Karakuri Sunday sessions and Labyrinth Gardens are brought to you through Patreon subscribers. So to remind you what goes on there, I need to do much more work on this. Many subscribers are watching live now. So thank you for your constant support. And say it's difficult to be here because I use a lot of gear and subscriptions now to keep this to you. And I'm slowly developing this sheep, water, and folklore course, taking longer than I thought because these weekly Sunday sessions take quite a bit of preparation, as you can imagine. But this is happening, and to subscribe is just a dollar, pound, or euro or more per month, and it goes to that address there. So thank you very much. Oh, it hasn't come up anyway. Let's see if I can. It hasn't. There we go. There it is. So thank you very much for your attention. Anyway, well, it leaves me now to tell you what's coming up on the next few Sunday sessions. Now, next week, definitely got guests, although not Seamus, unfortunately. It's dowsing. So we'll have a couple of dowsing guests, a couple of different approaches to dowsing. So they'll be with you, and I do a bit, and I'll show you my tools that I use and how I've used pendulums. So there's a bit of me and some guests as well. And then on the 28th of February, we've got one of the 5 Om sessions, and this one is the tree language story. And 1 or 2 people have asked to be guests on that. So that's going into the origins, not only of tree language to Om, but tree language as an origin of various other languages. We used our linear languages, but I love the Om because you read it from the ground upwards. And that's what I love about it. It really is literally starting from our roots and working upwards. So that's going to be on the 28th of February. And then we're going to have a month of tree stuff. So this is like a transition. And it's going to be practical stuff. 7th of March, we're going to go into bare root tree planting. It's the last month really for doing this. It's something you can do through the winter. But a lot of people, they leave it to last minute, and March tends to become a major tree planting time. So this is the first of 3 hands-on practical tree sessions that I'll be hosting in March. And there'll be some folklore with that as well, of course. And let's have another look at your comments here. Fascinating. I'm glad you enjoyed that because I often wonder, it's just me and my voice in this, and I'm just hoping you're going to ask questions and say something that will take me away from this. So thank you all today. As I say, it's strange not having the guests, but I've enjoyed presenting this to you thoroughly, and I trust you're going to go on to an enjoyable Valentine's Day, as superficial as it might be, but we have fun with it, don't we? So for those of you watching this as an archive, keep commenting and enjoy. Some people will be watching this. Not many people tonight, maybe because of Valentine's, but they'll watch it tomorrow and through the week. And people sometimes watch these months ahead. But whatever time you're watching, do the comments. I check them I check the comments and answer when I can. Subscribe and click on the bell icons. The YouTube, I know, has one. I think Facebook has one. And that'll remind you of details of the next Sunday session. So thanks very much. So me to say, enjoy a very safe week full of wonder, lots of inspiration, wonderful enchantments, lots of love. So until next Sunday, play well, and it's just bye-bye from me, and thank you for being with us this afternoon.